First tank went across the small bridge on the Fukam Canal. I learned the name of it later, and all hell broke loose. That tank got ripped with automatic weapon fire, rocket fire, and that tanker gunned it and took off up the road. As he did that, our tanker guns it, and he starts to go across the bridge, and I'm thinking, didn't he see what the hell just happened?
Right now, we're working hard on our next episode in our series called The Battle That Changed Everything. That's our look at the battle for Hue and the war in Vietnam. As we are telling the story, we're also busy sharing extended interviews and bonus material that we have collected during our reporting on this important moment in history that is still having an effect on veterans across this country. Today, I want to share an extended clip from my interview with a Marine who fought at Hue. On this episode, we hear from Bill Purcell, who fought with the Alpha 11 Marines.
Wounded, we dragged off the tanks with us, and they were laying in the street, and we formed a circle around them. And we were firing to every window, doorway, whatever we could find.
My name is Josh Rowe, and this is Tomorrowtown, Tennessee.
I graduated high school at 17, and I wanted to join the Marines, and my mother wouldn't sign the paperwork. So the Coast Guard didn't have that requirement, and they had a 12-month reserve program that I went into. And it was electronic technician. And I told them, I said, guys, I'm not strong in math. Don't worry about it. Well, I go through boot camp. I go up to school in Groton, Connecticut. Well, suffice to say, I didn't last a month. As punishment, they sent me to a ship, a cutter. Well, Coast Guard water boats, you know. I tried to get an icebreaker, and they wouldn't go for that one. That's good duty. So they sent me back to New York, to Staten Island, to the Coast Guard cutter Spencer. The 326-foot cutter. At that time, that was the biggest ship they had, the biggest ships they had. And the primary responsibility was ocean stations. The first and third districts between New England and the Middle Atlantic states. And there was a Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo stations. Bravo was just outside the ice pack. And the Canadian Coast Guard took that one. Charlie was halfway between Newfoundland and Ireland, just south of Greenland. And the North Atlantic in November and December is not a nice place to be. It is rough. As a matter of fact, our decks were secured the entire time we were there. And if I hadn't stood bridge watch twice a day, I would never have seen the sky for a month. So you're on a station for a month and you're drifting. You drift off station, you get the engines going, go back on station until you're relieved by the next cutter coming in. And I did a Charlie, a Delta, an Echo. Echo was straight out from the Bermuda Triangle. So that's pretty calm water. And I was getting ready to leave the cutter after my 12 months active duty. And I had to report to Commander Kelly's office. He was the XO. And he said, well, since you're one of the only qualified 50 caliber gunners, you've been extended for 3 months. We have orders for GETMO. GETMO is mandatory for every Naval and Coast Guard ship above a certain size. And it's a training exercise. It's similar to wartime training exercise. And they're pretty strict down there. So to me, it didn't matter. What the hell, 3 more months. And we're going to be in warm areas. So I went down to GETMO. We went through the training and everything else. And it was a whole new experience and insanity. But then I got back to New York and I was released. I went to one reserve meeting and I said, no way in hell. I'm not doing this for 4 more years. No. So I went down to the Marine recruiter, and he said, I don't want to talk to you. First, I get no credit for you because you're in the service already, and you're twice the paperwork. I said, well, too bad. So he kind of liked that attitude. And it was basically, we arranged for an inter-service transfer from the Coast Guard to the Marine Corps. The only problem with that was I was an E3 pay grade. And when they enlisted me in the Marine Corps, they knocked me down from an E3 to an E2, probably first class. I didn't know any better. I couldn't argue the case, I'd be honest with you. And when I was down at Whitehall Street in New York, which is the big draft recruiting station where all the draftees were going through and the Marines who were going through, there was a gunnery sergeant in charge in the Marines called Gunnery Sergeant Schmidt. Kind of a hard ass, but he was decent. Since I had rank, I was in charge of 8 recruits going down to Cape May, New Jersey for boot camp. Paris Island. And we're flying down from LaGuardia to, I believe, Savannah. And he said, Purcell, 2 things. I said, yeah, Gunny. He said, 1, don't let them know you're an E2. And 2, don't lose any of them. So thank God I got down there with all 8 guys. I'd never let them know I was an E2 until around the end of boot camp. They were selecting who's graduating E2 versus E1. They went through my paperwork, realized I was an E2 already. So the sand hit the fan, and they wanted to know where that effing squid spy Purcell was. Because what they were doing back then, since there were complaints about cruelty at boot camp.
Right.
They were sending in senior enlisted people, corporals and sergeants, dumbing up the paperwork. They have them go through as spies and report on atrocities. So they realized I wasn't the spy, but still I had to get the treatment. Anyway, boot camp, from there to Camp Geiger for infantry training. From Camp Geiger, I took the test for recon. I passed, almost killed myself doing it, but I passed. Then it was jump school, jungle warfare school in Panama. And we're just getting ready to start scuba school when all the hill battles began in the DMZ. Since my group hadn't progressed far enough in the training, we got our orders to Vietnam. That August, I was in Camp Pendleton, California, going through what they call staging, and then from there to Vietnam. Now, when you're in staging is when you're assigned what division you're going to. We only had 2 infantry divisions in Vietnam, the 1st and the 3rd for Marines. And I knew the 3rd was up on the DMZ, and I kind of knew I didn't want that. So we're online. It was real simple. 1st, 3rd, 1st, 3rd, 1st, 3rd. So I'm kind of counting heads, realizing, oh, man, I'm going to the 3rd. So I dropped my paperwork, got out of line to pick it up, and got in behind the guy behind me. He went to the 3rd. I went to the 1st. I'm happy about that. About 2 weeks later, I get to Vietnam, and I wind up at a place called the 11th Motors just outside of Da Nang. I think that was what the 1st Regiment's rear area was. I'm not sure. But I lasted 4 or 5 days there. I don't know why. I wasn't a mechanic or anything. And then I got my orders for 1st Battalion, 1st Marines. I said, great. I said, where are they? They said, right now, they're up in Quang Tri. The 1st Regiment's been upcon to 3rd Marine Division. They were getting hit so bad up there, they had to get more Marines. So my desire to skip the 3rd, the DMZ, went out the window. Got to Quang Tri. Went to some more training a little bit, maybe about a week's worth. Then I got my assignment to Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, 3rd Platoon. They were at an area called C4. C4 was 4,000 meters south of the DMZ on the coast. So you had the ocean, beach, pine trees, backwater. I'll call it backwater. And every dry spot in the backwater was a position, a fighting position. So when I got there and I reported to my platoon leader, Lieutenant Courtney, he said, do you have any special skills? And I said, well, I was a qualified 50 caliber gunner in the Coast Guard. He goes, great. You're going to the gun squad. Thank you, sir. Great news. I wasn't walking point. I wasn't walking tail and Charlie. And I wasn't being requested to do anything stupid. So I get to the gun squad, and they were pretty decent guys. Squad leader's name was Ozzy. He was a short timer. On one of the patrols, when you went just to the west of us, was a bunch of sand dunes, almost like a small desert area. And the bottom of each sand dune was a crystal pool of water, a crystal clear pool of water. So every several nights, a squad or 2 was able to go out and take a bath in the water. The next morning, with the wind and the sand, the water was crystal clear again. It was pretty amazing. One day, you're out there on patrol in a village, and to give you a point of reference, there was a major battle in 68, I think, called Dai Do, north to Dong Ha. And we were in a village area east of Dido. And some of the Marines got a little too handy with the villagers, heavy-handed. And we got back to our area. Next morning, right at dawn, 3 122 millimeter rockets came screaming into our base. So they knew where we were. Now, when you think about that and you think about what happened in Dido,
Yeah.
How the hell did all these NVA get so far south? Anyhow, after our time there, we went back to Quang Tri and just ran patrols. So they were building a new air station in Quang Tri because Dung Ha was in the range of the big guns of the north, and Quang Tri was out of range. So that made sense. So we ran security patrols, day patrols, never overnight patrols. Somehow I came down with a severe case of dysentery, and they put me in a field hospital near Quang Tri. And while I was there for several days, almost a week, my battalion got orders for Can Tien. So they moved up to Can Tien. I joined them about a week later. And Can Tien was a shithole. It was just awful. 3 small hills, nothing but mud. The LZ where we landed was mud up to your waist, and you had to get through that to get to where you were. My platoon position was at the forwardmost position facing the DMZ. That's where my gun position was. Now, the unit before us took almost 1,000 rounds of incoming one day. And when we got there, all we did was dig, kept digging those trenches deeper and deeper and deeper. I don't know how the hell they survived that barrage, because they didn't have very much in the way of protection. We went out in the Z one time, company size only. You never went out less than a company. And we were out there, and we were like on a berm. And we got orders to move 100 meters to the west. So my platoon moved to the west. Another platoon moved into our position. Half hour later, the NVA decided to come out and fight. We were sitting right on top of their gun bunkers. All their bunkers were underground. You couldn't see where they were. You knew they had bunkers because there was comm wire all over the ground. So that unit got hit pretty hard. Had several casualties. We didn't suffer any, which is good. Back into the base. We didn't go back out again until December 15th. Bravo Company went out 2 hours before us with 2 tanks. And they were a blocking force, acting as a blocking force. Our role was to go out a little bit to the west, turn and push to the east. In theory, pushing the NVA into the blocking force. Well, the NVA, their tactic was they'd always encircle the group that was out there. So as we cut through a bunch of scrub pines and whatnot, we ran into the group that was trying to encircle Bravo. So it was a gunfight began. It was like the shootout, the OK Corral. It was incredible. So my gunner knelt down for a new belt of ammo. I started feeding him the belt. And bam, just felt like I got hit with a sledgehammer in my head. I went down. I got shot through the helmet. So I was unconscious for a bit. I laid there, and I guess my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Buffalo, and Doc Okonski came up and they're saying, "Where are you hit? Where are you hit?" And I knew better. If it's a head wound, don't move. You got a shot, if you're still awake. So I'm pointing to my head. So I could feel Okonski's fingers going through my hair. Then I heard Buffalo say, "You lucky son of a bitch." And he's looking at my helmet. He went through my iron pot, my fiberglass liner, and out the other side. And he said, "Get on your feet and get up with everybody else." Meanwhile, my eyes must look like pinwheels. I'm walking through the enfilade of the fire. And my platoon leader is screaming at me to get down. So I kind of looked and said, "2 ain't going through here."
Oh, wow.
I was, So I got up to the other gun. Who was at the other gun? Milron and Milne. And I said, "Get that gun going." A few other words in between. And they said, "Would you believe it doesn't work?" Swell. So I'm looking around and I saw a brand new Sergeant E5. I didn't know who he was. He just joined us 2 days before, crawling with my machine gun. I didn't realize my gunner got hit as well. So I ran out, grabbed the gun, and got into action on the berm. So I could hear my lieutenant calling for air support. And I heard him kept saying, danger close, danger close. And I said, oh, shit. And he came up and he started A-gunning for me. And we ran out of ammo. And he started emptying his pockets of grenades. I said, all right. I started emptying my pockets of grenades. He looked at me, I looked at him, and he threw long and I threw short. I wasn't sticking my head above that berm. And then he said, all right, let's get the hell out of here. And he said, blow up that piece of blankety blank. And I said, you just threw the last frag, Lieutenant. I can't blow anything up. So I'm dragging the gun out with me, crawling out. And that's an ass-kicking job. So I finally got to a bomb crater. I was trying to get my wind, and 3 other guys jumped in the crater with me. Said, come on, we got to keep moving. I said, I can't right now. I've been dragging this gun. I'm just whipped. They said, give us the gun. He gave me his M16. I gave him my 45, and we started moving out. At that point, I caught up with my squad leader, Dave Anthony, who was wounded, my gunner, Dave Francis, who was wounded, and the 3 of us are holding on to each other, walking back to the base. Everybody thought I got killed, the ones that saw me get hit. So I'm sitting on my bunker, and the platoon comes back in, and they come up, and they realize I wasn't dead, and they start rubbing my head for luck. And that was the last time out in the Z. And we left Cantien December 23rd. Got back to the Quang Tree area, and the area we were in was pretty decent. It was no mud, it was like a slight rolling hill, some kind of green grass, whatever, but it was a decent area. And we ran patrols out of there, sometimes 2-day patrols, sometimes 3 or 4, depending on Lieutenant Courtney, what he wanted to do. And one time we were out there, and we spotted 3 NVA, and we got into a running gun battle with them. And we lost contact. We couldn't find them. We found blood, but we couldn't find them. About 3-4 days later, another group was out, and they brought back a wounded NVA colonel. I guess he was one of the ones we shot.
Yeah.
He had orders for that district for the Tet Offensive. All that stuff got sent down to Saigon, to Westmoreland, who was nothing but a peacock. And they discounted. No, this can't happen. All right, whatever you say. And then the Air Cav, and I think the 101st was moving into our area. They were taking the Marines out of the Z one by one by one. We were supposed to be going back to Fubai. We were the last company to get out. The only ones that got out that day was my platoon and half of the 1st and 2nd platoon. The rest was stuck in Quang Tree. We got to Fubai. It was a huge base. Clean clothes, showers, hot shower, the whole 9 yards. And we got to go to slop shoot. The company commander gave us on-base liberty. Now, the slop shoot's the enlisted man's bar. You get a good reason why it's called that. And next morning, but sometime during the middle of the night, we got shelled. Big rockets coming in. And we got out of our large GP tent we were staying in, got into a bunker. All clear came. We got back to inside and went back to sleep. An hour or so later, we got kicked out of the back bunk again. Come on, we had to go. There's a CAC unit getting overrun south of here. We had to go down and help them. So we boarded trucks, headed south. You got down to this area. I don't know where it was. It wasn't too far, but you could smell there was a fight. You could smell the cordite and the gunpowder in the air. About 20 minutes later, the trucks turn around, head back to Fubai, in the south gate, out the north gate. And we headed toward what we didn't know was Way City. And we got up to where Route 1 took a dramatic right-hand turn north. And right there at the turn was a blown-up South Vietnamese tank with several South Vietnamese dead laying around there. And it was sporadic gunfire going on. It was very high and accurate. We couldn't proceed on trucks, so we dismounted, and my group, my gun, and a squad moved to the right behind a building. And these buildings were big. They're like almost like a mansion compared to Vietnamese hooches. Right. To be honest with you, they're very impressive. We were sitting there for about 5 minutes, and our right guide, Bobby Velda, came back, stumbling back. He'd been shot in both arms. All he kept saying was he dropped the 79, which was the grenade launcher. So my squad leader, Woody, ran out to get it. I ran out to cover him. So as he ran out and bent down to pick up the 79, 3 NVA stepped out from behind the wall. Brand new uniforms, cleaner than hell. And they're looking at him. He's looking at them. I'm looking at them. And I couldn't open fire because Woody was right in my way. Thank God they moved off. About 5 minutes later, 3 Marine tanks come up. I think it was 2 or 3 tanks came up. And I'm yelling at the tanker out in the turret, hit the building, hit the building. I didn't realize he didn't have any ammo. So with that, Captain Batchelor, who was our company commander, and the gunny, they told us, mount up, get on the tanks. I was on the second tank, up front, left side. I had the turret as protection. First tank went across the small bridge on the Fukam Canal. I learned the name of it later, and all hell broke loose. That tank got ripped with automatic weapon fire, rocket fire, and that tanker gunned it and took off up the road. As he did that, our tanker guns it and starts to go across the bridge. And I'm thinking, didn't he see what the hell just happened? So we get into it. Luckily, I had the turret right next to me, so I was being shielded. The guys on the right side took the worst of it. And the word came, dismount, get off the tanks. So we had our wounded, we dragged off the tanks with us, and they were laying in the street, and we formed a circle around them. And we were firing to every window, doorway, whatever we could find. And this street was like a shop street, if I'm correct. Upstairs where you lived, downstairs was their shop, whether it be a bicycle shop or whatever they were doing. And it was, all the buildings were tight together. And there may have been a few alleys to the left and to the right. And we got the wounded, and we kicked in the doors and got the wounded out of the street. And they were shot up pretty bad. And the gunny says, everybody out, we're moving forward. So I don't know if you understand what a fire team rush means. Fire team is 4 Marines. The basic component of the Marine Corps is a fire team.
Yep.
So one guy moves forward, he covers, the other 3 move. We were doing fire team rushes by squad level. So I'd run up, I'd jump across the road, the street, and I'd cover. Everybody else would come up behind me. The same thing all the way up. We got up to a rather large roundabout. And right in front of that, at the roundabout, was a causeway elevated about maybe 10 feet above the rice paddies on both sides. About 20 minutes later, half hour later, up the road comes another convoy, is Golf 25. I don't know whether they, I guess our battalion commander, Colonel Gravel, heard what was going on the radio and scrambled and got Golf 25 to come up with him. And that was pretty good. We had some more help. So the decision was made, we're going to proceed over the causeway. Tanks first, trucks. They had a truck with a quad 50. A truck with a quad 50 is 450 caliber machine guns on one unit. Very impressive piece of equipment. And then they had the trucks with the wounded on it. And we were walking along both sides of the causeway. About, I want to say halfway, 2/3 of the way across, they opened up on us. So we all dove down to the bottom of the causeway in the rice paddy area we're at. And word came back, Alpha 6 is down. That's Captain Batchelor. Alpha 3 up. 3rd platoon up. All right, we get on our platoon sergeant, Sergeant Gonzalez. G's, I called him. And he says, get online, fix bayonets on 3, we charge. And I said, gee, this isn't horrible. What the hell are you doing? You know what I mean? He says, shut up and get online. Well, you don't fix the bayonet on the machine gun, number one. But sure enough, he says 3 and up we went. It was the worst mud you could imagine, up to your knees. You're trying to run through this stuff. just beat the hell out of you. So we got up to the end of our ice patio. It was a berm. And I was just trying to catch my breath. And the word kept going, we got to get into the city, And it was a giant, not a giant, maybe 4 feet in diameter drainage pipe between the road, the rice paddy, and the city. So we crawled through the pipe, got into the city, secured the 2 buildings on the edge of the road, and then the rest of the convoy advanced forward, and we moved up to the MACV compound. It wasn't too far up. They were really happy to see us, the Army guys in the MACV compound. They didn't realize we were a handful. And we were in a walled courtyard, just sitting there. And the MACV guys come out there. I guess they're stewards, whatever you call them, they're messmen. They had those little pints of milk you'd give the kindergarten kids, right? And half of bologna sandwiches, and that's what we were getting. That was the first food we had, the first and last food for 3 days. And then the word came, move up to the river. And we moved up to the river where they had the Perfume River Bridge. And to the right of the bridge was a small park. We turned that into an LZ. We got into the trench in front of the LZ. Behind us was a university building that was on the southeast corner. On the southwest corner was another university building. The NVA had that. And the civilians that were trying to escape were coming to the university building that was right behind us. So they were filling in that thing. Somebody in the rear, a brigadier general, didn't know what the hell was going on, ordered Golf 25 across the bridge, get to the Citadel. And they ran into a butcher shop. I mean, we heard the firing. It was really bad. And then my colonel comes up in a Jeep. He says, Gunner, give me a gun team and a fire team. Follow me. Okay. He races across the bridge. We race across the bridge. Our role was to act as an FPF, a final protective fire. We set up a line. It wasn't a very big line. Normally that's a platoon that does that, not a gun team and a fire team. And Golf 25 is pulling back. Our role was, if they were being pursued, we were to stop the pursuers, which meant we were the last ones across that bridge. Thank God they weren't pursued, but they were coming back carrying their dead and wounded with them. The colonel had his Jeep filled with wounded, and they got back over, and they were butchered pretty good. And they took the LZ. We moved into the MACV compound. Somehow, during the night, or before the night set in, the dark set in, the MACV guys came down. They wanted volunteers to escort the convoy of trucks up to the LZ with the wounded. Nobody moved. We were all just saying, hey, we just fought our asses off to get in here. Don't ask me why, but for some reason I looked back at the gunny and Sergeant Gonzalez, and I just nodded my head. They nodded their heads, and I got up. And I told my air gunner, give me your ammo, Sammy. This is on me. I can't order you to go. So he came anyway. And then 4 other guys came. So we got up. I reported to the convoy commander and I said, look, we're your escort. And he said, okay, this is what's going to go on. We're waiting for signal that the medevacs are coming in. They're going to be coming up the coast, and they're going to hit the river and head west. Once they turn west, we're going to head up to the LZ. Okay, so we're not going to have lights. We're going to be going at a little bit faster than a drag, but we want you guys to stay with us. I said, I got you. So I went back and told my guys, the volunteer group, I said, look, spread out both sides of the convoy. If they get hit, they're going to haul ass. Stay with them as best you can. Golf 25 is at the river. When you get close to the river, start screaming, Marines coming in, Marines coming in. So they don't open fire on you. I'll be in the back of the convoy. I can cover both sides of the street from there with the gun. I'll try and buy as much time as I can for you. Thank God we didn't get hit. So the choppers came in. We got the wounded unloaded. But prior to that, when we were still in the compound, they were saying, anybody got a pad and pencil? Anybody got a pad and pencil? So I went over to the truck, climbed up, and gave them my pad and pencil, pad and pen. And they were leaning down. The guy was almost on his knees with his ear next to Major Murphy, who was Colonel Gravel's XO, right, Colonel. And I couldn't hear what he was saying, but the corpsman sat up with a medic. I don't know what he was. Major Murphy gave a loud moan and said, God, please help my Marines. That was it. I can still hear those freaking words. We got the wounded off, got back in the trucks, got back in the compound. I found out where we were positioned, and we were inside barracks, and they had beds, which we lived on the ground. We had no beds. And I squad leader Woody said, crap out for a while. And outside of each barracks, whatever, squad bay, there was a set of sandbags, fighting position. So we would take the compound, started taking fire from the buildings across from it. And so I jumped out of the rack and came in up on my gun. I was waiting, and up comes this guy next to me with a machine gun, one of the MAGV guys. And I said to him, do you know how to work that effing thing? He looked at me and said, yeah, I know how to work it. Then I looked down, he had more stripes than a zebra. I said, oh, shit. Big mouth, So I could see gunfire coming from a window to my right, elevated. So I just immediately turned and started firing. And then this whatever he was, the sergeant, started screaming at me, call your shots. You let me know when you're going to fire. I said, hey, if I see action, I'm firing, period. Deal with it. And then my A gunner got in between me and him. His back was to me. So the ejects would be hitting him in the back and not hitting this guy in the face. So that settled down. So we've settled that one down. And all went quiet. Next morning, we're outside the barracks and waiting for orders what the hell we were going to do. Sure enough, they got hit again. The gunny says, get back to your previous positions. We went back in, firefight all over again. Got secured. And a little bit later, back out on the street, and we're up toward the gate where the main entrance to the MAGV was. And all of a sudden, you hear over the loudspeaker, officers call, officers call. With that, we all dropped to our knees. Our captain and gunny are shaking their heads. They walked over to the MAGV commander and says, you don't think the NVA know what officers call means? They're going to lob in mortars and rockets on you, dumbass. Yeah. So then the next announcement comes, the BX is open. The BX is open. Jesus Christ. So finally we got out and we took the position at the LZ. Yeah. Golf 25. I don't know where they went. They probably went back to MAGV or whatever. And that was our position for 2 or 3 days. Every day, one squad would stay at the LZ. The other 2 squads would move along to the east, trying to see what we could find. And bear in mind, when we first went into that city, there's probably may have been 70, 75 of us. At the end of the first day, there may have been 60. And first couple of days, we didn't really have any big action. Golf 25 kept getting into it. They kept probing to the west. And then we went over and we took we moved into the university building that was the southwest corner that where the NVA were. And they pulled out of there. Don't know why. I did later on, but they had every window covered with a sniper or a rocket position. So you couldn't go near a window. I had my gun set up on a table, pulled back from the window, and I went to look out the window. I took my helmet off. I saw this on TV. I took my helmet off. I'm kind of peeking out, and he must have been waiting, and he shot. It hit the edge of the window. The force of it hitting the edge of the window sent me flying backwards with my own reaction of pulling back. That bullet hit the wall, ricocheted out, and hit one of my guys in the hip. And he was bellowing in pain. It went in deep enough to cause a lot of pain, but no serious damage. So we got out of that room, and we had to get him out of there. So I ripped the door off the hinges. Don't ask me how I did that, because those doors were big and solid. I ripped it off the hinges, and we got him on the door and got him out. With that, I think Hotel 25 had just come into the city, and they were taking over the university building from us. They had a full company. We didn't. As I'm going down the ladder to the stairwell, I heard this voice from up above me, hey, Gunner, what's the story? And it was a Hotel 25 machine gunner. And I said, fire and move, they'll rocket your ass. And he said, okay, thanks, Gunner. So we got out of the building. We went back to the LZ. I think that night we had 6 wounded just from that building. One gun team, Ondo and Milron, they were up on a roof with the gun. They got hit with a rocket. They got lowered down. You've probably seen pictures of Marines being lowered off the roof on a rope. That was that. And that night, we spent the night in the South Vietnamese police station, just east of the LZ. So we got to get some sleep. Next night, we were at the LZ. No, before that, it was day 3. I'm sorry, I'm running ahead. They finally got us some food. 1 sea ration pack per 3 Marines. And what do we get? Ham and Mothers, the worst possible sea ration you could imagine. I wouldn't put that filter in my mouth. So I had Sammy, my A gunner, and another A gunner, Charles. And I said, tell you what, guys, just give me the crackers and cheese or whatever's in there. You take the other stuff, and I'll live on that. And I forget the next time we ate, maybe 2 days later. But the one night we spent in the police station was pretty decent because we slept on their beds. They stood watch since we didn't trust them. We had a couple of Marines up, making sure they were awake and on watch. So we got, at least 3-4 hours at a clip sleep. Next day, the 4th of February, we started advancing and we went into the Joan of Arc school. Now, to get into the Joan of Arc school, you went through an administration building, right? Small. Then you went through one door, out the back door, got the back door into a courtyard, and the school was there. It was a typical French design square school with the big opening in the middle, all right? And it was like a tunnel that went under the second level of the one side of the east side of the building. On the outside that tunnel, there were columns supporting the edge of the second floor. Between those columns, every 8 feet, there was 3 or 4 feet of sandbags. So we moved down. I moved down as far right as I could go. Opposite us was a 1-story piece of the building where the NVA were, and we're taking a lot of fire. So I got up on the second floor of a stairwell, and I was firing out a window. Sergeant Gonzalez was running back and forth between those columns, and he was firing laws. They were rocket-propelled grenades. And I saw a flash come out of the window that I was firing at, and I knew it was a rocket. So I yelled to my guys, the rocket, get down. So we got down, the rocket arced low and hit G. Didn't kill him at first. I could hear him moaning, calling for help, and I started screaming for the corpsman. Doc Okonski got to him, and he was gone. That's a hell of a loss. Just a little Mexican guy, tough as tough as nails, took crap from nobody, and really he took care of the platoon. He was wounded 2 or 3 times that first day, and he stayed with us, and then all of a sudden he's gone.
A big thank you to Bill Purcell for this conversation. And again, this is part of my special series on the Battle for Way called The Battle That Changed Everything. You can find so much more information in the show notes of this episode of Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. This podcast is a production of NewsChannel 9, Fox Chattanooga, and Sinclair Broadcast Group Chattanooga. I hope you join us again real soon.